Hi guys, it's Kirsty. Today's video is about fearing losing control. But before I go into that, I would like to ask please do subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button below in order to stay up to date with new videos as they're released. So this is a video that we wanted to cover on this channel because the fear of losing control is a big driver in OCD and anxiety, and it's one of the things that drives us to do things that we think are helping us to control certain things and stop certain things happening, i.e. kind of compulsive behaviours or avoidance. And we do these things because we are trying to make sure our feared scenario doesn't happen. So essentially we're trying to control a situation. And of course we know that this is a false sense of control because the more we do these things, these avoidant behaviours or these compulsions and the resistance that we might put up, the more we feed into the OCD and anxiety, the fear cycle, because we're essentially doing things to show our brain that this feared scenario of us losing control absolutely cannot happen under any circumstance, because if it did, it would be 100% awful. We couldn't cope with it. Therefore, we're doing these behaviours to do everything we can to stop it from happening. So the more we're saying to our brain it's awful, we must stop it from happening, the more our brain marks it as being very dangerous. And as is the nature of OCD particularly, it will keep on presenting it, so we then can continue stopping it happening. Of course, the problem with this is that it doesn't stop it happening. Actually, we have incorrect beliefs about how much control we have over things, and that's one of the problems with us trying to over control. So just to reiterate that our compulsions and avoidance and resistance is us trying to control a scenario. But the more we do this, the more we feel like that scenario is going to happen. So the more we try to control, the more out of control we inadvertently end up feeling. And the more out of control we end up feeling, the more we feel like we have to do these control behaviours. So that feeds into the cycle. But also the other incorrect thing that we believe, and I'm repeating myself just to try and be clear, is that we believe that perhaps we do have control over certain things, which is incorrect, because there are certain things in life we don't have control over. So there's no point trying to control those things because we simply can't. For example, we can't control what other people do. We can't control their behaviours and their feelings. That's down to them. So we can do everything we can to remain safe, but doesn't mean that other people are going to be behaving in a safe way. So that's that. Then moving on to sort of that fear of losing control in terms of we might have fears that we will just lose control of ourselves and snap and go crazy and do the thing that we're scared of doing. So for example, like the fear of loss of control could really feed into harm OCD. So we might have been having harm obsessions for a while, and we do like maybe it's around knives. Let's go with that. So we might have done certain things, so avoiding using knives, hiding knives. So by doing that, we're showing our brain that we're that we're a potential danger, that we might do something with them. And then we might imagine ourselves doing something to someone and the aftermath in order to test ourselves to make sure that we don't actually want to do it. So we might do that to reassure ourselves and then feel quite distressed and use that as reassurance. Okay. But the problem is that we've already told our brain and that's dangerous. So then OCD could come up with the fact that, okay, I don't want to do it, but what if I just lose control and do it anyway, and I can no longer kind of control what I'm doing? And the more we, try and test ourselves to see if that might be the case and hide knives and avoid knives, etc., the more intense the obsessions may begin, then we might start to feel urges. There's sort of energy in our hands as we're holding a knife or near a knife, almost like we're going to just grab it. we're going to just lose control and stab somebody. So you can see how kind of the constant checking and hide of how we might feel in scenarios there, and the compulsion to hide the knives will continuously play into our minds to show us that it feels more and more likely that we will, do the thing that we're afraid of. And then the urges start to kick in and we feel like we are going to lose control. So that's the thing. It's like we try and test ourselves and reassure ourselves, say, yeah, but I don't actually want to do that. But then the whole yeah, but what if you don't have control over it and then you just do it anyway? So something that I've experienced is, say after I've been watching a violent program in the evening. And so this is something I used to avoid because it would stay in my mind and I'd have maybe harm obsessions afterwards. Last couple of years, as I've worked on my recovery, I'd stopped avoiding, and it's a huge achievement to me to be able to watch these things now and enjoy them. But there have been times when, after watching something like Killing Eve, which is about a psychopath, a violent psychopath, would previously maybe have gone to bed, and even though I didn't want to do anything like to kill my partner, I would then think, but what if I go to sleep and I do it in my sleep, so it's not something I can actually control? So the thing is that if that's going to happen, there is actually nothing you can do to control it. Like, if you're going to go crazy, you're going to go crazy. When I say sorry, I mean, if you're going to sort of lose your mind in a sense and, lose control, lose your mind, there's nothing you can do to stop that happening, really, because there might be a chemical imbalance in there that, that something's going wrong and you're becoming unwell, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. And this is where it's kind of, like with my example, with my going to sleep and fearing that I might do something in my sleep. How could I possibly stop that from happening? Aside from obviously hiding, anything. But if that's going to happen like in your sleep, then maybe you'd find something, another weapon. So this is the point, is that there's only so much we can do to prevent these things from happening, like that sheer loss of control. If that happens in a human being, then that's a kind of faulty mechanism in the brain that's happening. And if it was something that could be stopped, then it would be stopped if ever it has happened before. So this kind of surrendering is very important here, that, accepting what we can control and accepting what we can't control, and knowing that we have OCD and that we're sort of hiding things and avoiding and doing all of those things to help us feel more in control, knowing that they make us feel less in control. Why don't we just give up that and accept that if we did end up doing something that's not in our best interest, which obviously we want to try not to do, but it's out of our control if that's going to happen in our minds. And that's a big part of kind of, this fear of loss of control, is accepting that that's exactly what it is. It's a loss of control. And trying to over control by doing these avoidant compulsive behaviours makes it feel all the more likely that this loss of control could happen. So it's not helpful. It's feeding into it. And there are certain things in life that we can't control. And, if something, certain mechanisms in our brain are going to kind of backfire like it might do with some people, then there's not really a lot we can do about that. And this is where unconditional self-acceptance comes in, because, as fallible human beings, we can work to do our best and be the best that we can, but if we fall short of this sometimes, then we want to aim to accept ourselves. You might be thinking, yeah, but this is pretty extreme. What if you snap and lose control and do something you don't want to do? But that's the thing. You've lost control. It was, out of your control, not deliberate. It was not something, that you wanted to necessarily do. And this kind of accepting the fact that you're a human being and mechanisms that go on in our minds and our bodies, things don't always run perfectly. This is all part of the unconditional acceptance, self and life acceptance. It's, it's seeing clearly that we can't control everything that goes on in our minds and bodies, and learning to be a bit more comfortable with this, and view this the same way that somebody who doesn't suffer from anxiety or OCD may. So I also wanted to cover in this video, because I think with, the fear of something snapping in our brain and us losing control, that could tie in with the fear of, people talk about the fear of going crazy, which actually, that could mean any number of things. Well, firstly, it's a politically incorrect way of talking about it, saying that somebody might go crazy anyway. If we think about, what do we mean by that? Becoming confused, or do we mean, seeing things that aren't there, or what, so firstly, it's good to kind of, consider what you mean by going crazy. If the fear might be sort of losing control of your sort of senses, or it all ties into some, it all ties into a loss of control in some way of your behaviour and the way that you feel. So, like I say, whether that is what you might be referring to as going crazy, or if it like losing your mind or snapping, it's a loss of control of your behaviour. And this fear of this kind of loss of control, it can go into other, it can go into other themes as well, outside of whether we might be fearing, doing harm to ourselves or other people, but it can also seep into other themes as well. So, for example, with our OCD, relationship OCD, the fear of control may kind of seep into that as well, in terms of, I worry I'm just going to lose control and mess up my relationship by, being horrible to my partner, or breaking up, or losing control and just breaking up with them, or doing cheating or something like that. So so that fear of losing control, thinking almost feeling like that, what if I just can't stop myself and I just do it? So that fear of that loss of control might seep into other things, other themes as well, outside of just harm. And again, it's kind of firstly with that, the fear is kind of, maybe losing your partner. But if you think that, what if I lose control and do something? But again, it's the unconditional self-acceptance, is seeing clearly that if you lost control and you sabotage your relationship, then it wouldn't be as awful as you think it would. And unconditional self-acceptance would help you to see that exactly that, as I said, lost control. Or you did regrettable things, but you could work on accepting yourself for that, and not writing yourself off as a human being, because people, human beings do a mixture of, good behaviours and regrettable behaviours as well. And of course, people can, as we've sort of said in other videos, can learn from, regrettable behaviours as well. So I just wanted to give that as another example of how we might worry about, losing control, is that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that we do something that could endanger someone's life. It could or cause irreversible damage to somebody or ourselves. It can also seep into other themes as well. And, there'll be other fears that go alongside sort of that fear of losing control, fear of losing other people, losing our relationships, or fear of everlasting guilt, as well. So, one last thing that I did want to mention before finishing the video is, So the fear of loss of control can also kind of seep into how we feel about our recovery as well. So our OCD theme might change to latch onto our recovery once we've started to make some progress. So we may find ourselves over controlling our recovery, trying to get exposures 100% right, trying too hard to force acceptance by jumping all over the thoughts as they come in, trying to like rationalize every thought, or, you know, getting really upset when we feel like we can't accept. And that all is, you know, trying to over control a situation because we're afraid of losing control. Again, because we may have viewed when we were at our worst with OCD, you know, perhaps we were feeling actually quite ill with it. I mean, I know I certainly did. My nerves were completely frayed. I couldn't keep any food down. Whenever I tried to eat, I would kind of retch or gag, as you might call it in the States. And I had I couldn't stop going to the toilet, and I had bad diarrhea as well. I was shaking, and I couldn't sleep. I just felt out of control. And I never wanted to go back to that again. And it made me over control my recovery at certain points. And again, that was fear of losing control in the sense that I felt I'd already lost control with my OCD. I was, you know, scared of that because of the breakup urges I was having with my relationship OCD that I was suffering from. You know, I was also frightened because I felt like I'd almost lost the best relationship I'd ever had, my most precious person to me. And I'd sort of looked at it like, oh, I lost control then, and I might have done, you know, ruined my lovely, you know, my good relationship that I was in. And so then I found myself over controlling things in my recovery, trying to, and inadvertently ending up feeling worse. Because then I'd find myself ruminating about the best way to recover and feeling worse because of that, because I was compulsively feeding in, I was performing compulsions around my recovery then, like over researching, trying too hard to accept, trying too hard to get the right exposure, wanting to do exposures all the time. So again, all of these were kind of things that I was doing to over control in order to avoid the loss of my perceived loss of control. So that's just another thing I wanted to mention as well. So I just wanted to summarize the video because I feel that the fear of loss of control can mean several things, and I have of course mentioned several things in the video, but I do believe that that's because it can mean different things to different people, and it can affect us in different ways. So firstly, I discussed the fact that us trying to prevent our feared scenario coming, our feared scenario happening, where like we don't want to lose control of that situation, so we over control by avoidance and compulsions and resisting of, you know, feelings, anxiety, etc. So that inadvertently ends up making us feel even more out of control, because as we know, it feeds a cycle, because that's the mechanism of OCD and anxiety. Secondly, I went into kind of details about loss of control in terms of snapping, like something, you know, snapping in our brain, losing control, and like with harm OCD, for example, and how we could lead up to feeling like that by trying to reassure ourselves that we don't actually want to do it, so it's okay. But then our brains come up with the idea that, yeah, but what if you lose control and do it anyway? So that's how that can kind of come about. And I've discussed there with the unconditional self-acceptance piece, and seeing it very clearly that a loss of control means that we can't control it. And then also talking about how it can seep into other themes. So I gave an example with relationship OCD, and also my own experience with it, with my perceived loss of control in terms of when my OCD was at its worst, and how that fear caused me to obsess in my recovery. So I hope this video has been helpful and talked about some of the ways that the fear of losing control, how this can, fuel our fear cycle, and how it's the perceived control that we think we have is that it's perceived, and we don't have as much control over certain things as we think we do. So no point in trying to control those things. So I hope it's been useful, and do take care. Bye.